Testing, channel Bahasa Inggris, channel Bahasa Inggris. Terima kasih.
Check 1, check 1, 2, 3, good afternoon. This is your interpreter in the English channel. Check 1, 2, 3. Rusia ya?
Ladies and gentlemen, the opening ceremony is going to start in 5 minutes. Please be seated. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and we are delighted to welcome you to Bali Nusa Dua Convention Center for joining the 5th International Short Course for Legal Officers with the theme of Peace, Election, and Democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, this event is expected to become a forum for the exchange of experiences and informations, as well as to discuss issues related to practice and constitutional jurisprudence that are beneficial for the development of constitutional courts and similar institutions in the Asian region. Ladies and gentlemen, we, the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia, has the honor to present you this international short course. This event involves various elements, ladies and gentlemen, ranging from our counterparts in associations of Asian constitutional courts and equivalent institutions, officers from the Registrar and the Secretariat General of the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia, to academics from all corners of the country. My name is Anak Agung Yumas. On behalf of the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia, it is such an honor to me to introduce and welcome the distinguished guests in this very fine afternoon. Welcome to His Excellency, Dr. Wahiduddin Adams, as Justice of the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia. Welcome to Dr. Idewa Gede Palguna, SHM, former Constitutional Justice of the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia. Professor Bertus de Villiers, as a member of the State Administrative Tribunal of Western Australia, and also adjunct professor of the Law School of Curtin University. Professor Dr. Topo Santoso, SHM, as permanent lecturer at the Faculty of Law, University of Indonesia. We would like to also welcome all discussants and participants of this international course. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, let us focus on the screen and watch the video that we specially prepare for all our distinguished guests.
Halo teman-teman, selama ini apa aja sih yang udah dilakukan sama Mahkamah Konstitusi? Jadi, melalui putusannya, Mahkamah Konstitusi memiliki kewenangan untuk menguji undang-undang terhadap undang-undang dasar. Nah, Mahkamah Konstitusi juga menunjukkan kontribusi untuk menegakkan supremasi hukum, menguatkan demokrasi, sekaligus mengembangkan kesadaran dan kultur berkonstitusi warga negara. Terus juga nih, di antara putusan perkara pengujian undang-undang, banyak banget yang dinilai sebagai landmark decision. Landmark decision adalah putusan yang monumental dalam memberikan perlindungan hukum dan memulihkan hak konstitusi warga negara yang telah dijamin oleh Undang-Undang Dasar. Contohnya adalah hak keberatan anak di luar kawin dengan ayah biologisnya yang diputus pada tahun 2012. MK memulihkan hak anak di luar kawin dengan menyatakan inkonstitusional ketentuan dalam Undang-Undang Perkawinan yang menyatakan bahwa anak yang lahir di luar kawin hanya memiliki hubungan keperdataan dengan ibunya atau dengan keluarga ibunya. Tentu saja ketentuan itu tidak memberikan perlindungan hukum bagi anak di luar kawin dong. Oleh karena itu, MK menyatakan bahwa anak yang lahir di luar kawin bisa memiliki hubungan keperdataan dengan laki-laki yang dapat dibuktikan dengan ilmu pengetahuan dan teknologi melalui tes DNA dari ayah biologisnya.
Nah, selanjutnya ada putusan MK yang dinilai memulihkan hak masyarakat hukum adat terhadap hutan adat. Nah, pada tahun 2013, dalam putusan mengenai pengujian Undang-Undang Kehutanan dinyatakan bahwa menempatkan hutan adat sebagai bagian dari hutan negara merupakan suatu bentuk dari pengabaian terhadap hak masyarakat hukum adat. Mahkamah memutuskan bahwa hutan adat merupakan hutan yang berada dalam wilayah masyarakat hukum adat, jadi bukan lagi hutan negara yang berada dalam wilayah masyarakat hukum adat.
Selain itu, juga ada putusan berikutnya, yaitu putusan yang berkenaan dengan hak asasi manusia atas air, di mana tepat pada tahun 2015, teman-teman, Undang-Undang Sumber Daya Air ini dinyatakan inkonstitusional secara keseluruhan oleh Mahkamah Konstitusi. Jadi, akses terhadap air ini merupakan bagian dari hak asasi manusia, dan oleh karenanya, konstitusi mengamanatkan hak penguasaan negara atas air. Putusan Mahkamah Konstitusi menegaskan bahwa Undang-Undang Sumber Daya Air ini tidak dapat menjamin terwujudnya hak penguasaan negara atas air, karena itu dapat membuka peluang privatisasi dan komersialisasi pihak swasta atas pengelolaan sumber daya air. Privatisasi dan komersialisasi hak swasta atas pengelolaan sumber daya air ini jelas merugikan hak konstitusional warga negara.
Nah, teman-teman, ternyata putusan MK ini monumental dalam melindungi dan memulihkan hak konstitusional bagi penghayat kepercayaan. Dalam Undang-Undang Administrasi Kependudukan dinyatakan bahwasanya kartu keluarga dan KTP elektronik memuat mengenai kolom agama. Namun, khusus bagi warga negara penghayat kepercayaan, ternyata kolom agama tersebut dikosongkan loh, teman-teman. MK menyatakan dikosongkannya kolom agama di kartu keluarga dan KTP elektronik bagi penghayat kepercayaan ternyata telah menimbulkan diskriminasi dan kerugian konstitusional bagi warga negara penghayat kepercayaan terhadap Tuhan Yang Maha Esa.
Pada tahun 2017, MK memutuskan kolom agama dalam kartu keluarga dan KTP elektronik penghayat kepercayaan terhadap Tuhan Yang Maha Esa tidak lagi dikosongkan, melainkan dicantumkan penghayat kepercayaan tanpa merinci kepercayaan yang dianut.
Nah, selanjutnya pada putusan Mahkamah Konstitusi yang satu ini juga merupakan tonggak penting Pancasila menjadi dasar pengujian undang-undang. Salah satunya putusan pengujian undang-undang tentang pencegahan penyalahgunaan dan atau penodaan agama pada tahun 2010. Putusan ini menggunakan tolak ukur sila pertama Pancasila, yaitu ketuhanan yang Maha Esa dalam memaknai prinsip negara hukum Indonesia. Mahkamah Konstitusi menyatakan prinsip negara hukum Indonesia tidak harus dimaknai sama dalam arti rehtat maupun the rule of law, melainkan harus dilihat dengan cara pandang yang menempatkan prinsip ketuhanan Maha Esa sebagai prinsip utama serta nilai-nilai agama yang melandasi gerak kehidupan bangsa sekaligus tidak semata-mata berpegang pada prinsip individualisme maupun prinsip komunalisme. Nah, dari putusan ini membuktikan bahwa selain Undang-Undang Dasar 1945, Pancasila sebagai dasar dan ideologi negara yang menjadi jiwa Undang-Undang Dasar 1945 juga dapat menjadi dasar dalam pengujian konstitusionalitas undang-undang. Nah, dari putusan-putusan itu membuktikan bahwa sebagai peradilan konstitusi, Mahkamah Konstitusi telah menjalankan peran dan fungsi untuk mengawal konstitusi, melindungi hak konstitusional warga negara, dan sekaligus menjaga ideologi negara yaitu Pancasila.
Well, that's the end of the video, ladies and gentlemen. Before we proceed to the next agenda, we would like to greet as well our distinguished guest, Mr. Muhyiddin, as the Registrar of the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia, who are already gathered here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to listen to the opening and keynote speech delivered by Justice of the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Excellency, Dr. Wahiduddin Adams.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum.
Religious greetings, peace be upon us all. Good day, good afternoon. Welcome to our speakers, Dr. Dewa Gede Palguna, Mr. Professor Topo Santoso, Professor Bertus de Villiers. Welcome to our participants who are with us today.
Speech and welcoming you in Bahasa Indonesia.
We must be grateful and appreciate that ultimately we are able to meet in this opportunity, in this room, in good health. I hope that throughout our participation in these events, we remain and we are protected by God Almighty, by the gods, and we are always given the strength to do so. We also must appreciate that ultimately we have arrived at the end of the dark tunnel that we traveled together since approximately 2 years ago. Throughout the pandemic, we have been in a closed environment in order to reduce our mobility, movement space as social creatures. As part of a society, human beings require and desire to interact and to socialize, to fulfill our social and economic needs, not just in a personal space as human beings, but also in the context of as part of our country, as part of an international community, to build good relationships. It is a must, and it is inevitable. So I believe we have all felt the same way. However, the social interaction and our relationships cannot always be guaranteed to run smoothly as we may desire. There may be times, or maybe most of us have experienced that in our relationships with others, there is potential or actual conflict triggers that may negatively impact the relationship that has always been good between us. The conflict that may disrupt the peaceful relationship we have, whether we are working alone or the work that we do within the framework of cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, today, in this afternoon session, we will start a series of discussions, which will, God willing, will last for 2 days, consisting of 5 sessions, which will be conducted as a marathon in sequence. Therefore, in my opening, I asked us all to keep up our health, to keep up our stamina, stay healthy, so we can participate to the fullest of our activity. The commonality in our discussion we can summarize in 3 keywords, which also forms the theme for our short course, which is peace, general elections, and the people's sovereignty or democracy. It was also mentioned by Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court of Republic of Indonesia in his keynote speech in this morning's event. I wish to reverse the order of the concept in order to be able to find the connectivity between the 3. First, regarding the people's sovereignty or democracy. Today, the idea of democracy or the people's sovereignty in all its variations has been accepted by the international community and has become a major framework in the government's structure. The embodiment of democracy is convening general elections to elect representatives of the people, as well as to elect the leader of the country. In Indonesia, in 2024, in the coming years, in 2024, so it's just over a year from now, we have begun the process. 2 elections will be held. The first being the election of the members of the National Parliament, representing political parties, the members of the DPRD, which is the local parliament, and this is for the provincial parliament, as well as the regency or municipality parliament, as well as members of the DPD, or members of parliament representing each province, as well as the election of the president. The next election, the second election, will be held at a different time, but soon after the first election. The first election is in February, the next being in November. We will hold the regional head elections. Each province will hold elections to elect the governor, the vice governor, as well as the head of the regency and the deputy head of regency or the mayor. In the respective provinces, you can imagine how busy and complex the issues are, which will be faced in Indonesia in approximately the next 1.5 years. In addition, we do need to focus on the general elections, and this will be the first general election that Indonesia will try this particular implementation mechanism. And in its history, Indonesia has never had a record that narrates holding elections such as this. Ladies and gentlemen, participants of the short course, behind the grand idea of democracy, realized by convening elections, there are practices that demonstrate the tendency that holding elections can also be a triggering factor for conflict in society. From social conflicts in the form of dividing society due to actions or reactions where everyone is supporting different candidates or parties, through to violent conflicts that may result in physical violence, and even bloodshed. If in every election unrest emerges in the community, ultimately there will be a stigma, as if the transition of power by elections is cause of concern, that it will not be convened in a peaceful manner. Peace is the dream of every country. Many countries have carved the ideals of realizing peace as an ideal goal to be achieved in their constitutional preambles. The Indonesian Constitution, the 1945 Constitution, contains peace as a basic goal, which is the goal in the participation of Indonesia, the Indonesian people, in participating in maintaining world peace. The preamble of the 1945 Constitution states that to form a government of the state of Indonesia, which shall protect all the people of Indonesia and the independence and the land that has been struggled for, and to improve public welfare, to educate the life of the people, and to participate towards the establishment of a world order based on freedom, perpetual peace, and social justice. Therefore, the independence of Indonesia shall be formulated into a constitution of the Republic of Indonesia. Indonesia's independence was proclaimed after the Second World War, and many modern countries came to be after the Second World War ended. So it is appropriate that the war situation has become a tale of history that every nation wishes to forget. Although the millennials and the current young generation, and I would say some of you here, are far beyond the end of the Second World War, Indonesia's aspirations, as stated in the 1945 Constitution, is the objective of the country of Indonesia to live in a time of peace. Because history has proven that the development of a society and efforts to achieve prosperity and living in harmony can only be achieved in times of peace. In the discussion this morning, it was often touched upon that we remain consistent and are working towards living in a peaceful society. Ladies and gentlemen, show course participants and speakers, it is indeed true that the brief conclusion once conveyed by Barack Obama, which is democracy is messy. The character of democracy is messy because there are so many mouths that wish to speak, and for their interests to be heard, there are only so many ears that have to hear the same message. However, as we are all aware, We must maintain the fight for democracy to prevent power from being concentrated in one or mere few people. The adverse effects resulting from the accumulation of power in one or group of people are far greater than the disorder caused by the implementation of the idea of democracy. The potential of tyrannical power to change the atmosphere of peace is very much possible. In a short period of time, tyrannical power or autocracy with iron fists can create order and also disrupt our order. With regimes of power only relying on very few people, a country which was chaotic can be changed and can be changed quickly. However, the situation can also turn around quickly when the few holding power use the enormity of the power in their hands for the sake of fulfilling their own personal needs and the needs of their own people. I believe we've all experienced this amongst all the countries in our region. Sometimes power influences the personality of the people, of the person when they are entrusted with power. Power is like drinking seawater. The more you drink, it actually just makes you more thirsty, an insatiable thirst. I think we have noted various movements against tyranny in some of the world's greatest revolutions. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, its chaotic characteristics, which has an impact on the implementation of ideas on democracy, are often challenged, and this becomes a challenge. Scholars what happens in the international community is that there are political dynamics that undermine democratization. This pattern of undermining democracy is similar to natural disasters. The first phenomenon can happen in a massive scale, such as landslide or moving ground, but as long as its movement is not a hazard, we usually, in the first example, moving ground will actually cause landslides and endanger human lives. Or there's a second pattern, such as erosion. We often hear the results of survey research that there's a particular area where we have seen erosions occur and that there may be further disasters. Today, what often happens is the first pattern, namely a massive and sudden change, in the idea of democratization. For example, it's often written that there are populist governments challenging our scholars to correct the theoretical buildings of democracy. Populist governments, we can see in its various developments, have been able to win the general election, so they seem to get democratic legitimacy. However, in administering their government, it is precisely the tyrannical characteristics which emerge and expands. Therefore, there is a conclusion conveyed by scholars that elections will not necessarily be an arena for competition, producing the best leaders. So this is an area of concern for us. We must anticipate this so that we do not see the gradual erosion of democracy. And we're not aware of this, we don't feel it, which means we would be rendered helpless against it is not easy to overcome this erosion. Ladies and gentlemen, participants of the short course, as a country, as part of the international community, we are undergoing a difficult time in politics. This is a massive and sudden change in the idea of democratization. There's also the financial side, where it disrupts economic growth, so that development does not promise equity. And we have also just undergone the pandemic. And from the environment perspective, there's the threat of climate change that is real before our eyes. The difficulties we face most likely may trigger and accelerate conflict at the local level, at the national level, and at the international levels. Therefore, we must be able to prepare ourselves to face these challenges, but not alone, but rather to do so together. It is impossible that the responsibility for solving all these problems should be borne on the shoulders of individuals, but rather by working together, the burden of dealing with all the problems will become lighter. There's a saying in Indonesian, it is about making sure we share our burdens. It is called gotong royong, which is a philosophy of the people of Indonesia. It is proven that we have been able to overcome various situations that has happened to the people of Indonesia thus far. Ernest Renan, a French scholar, once published a book from his history lectures under the title, What is a Nation? In Indonesia, it was written by Professor Arsha Bhatiar, if I'm not mistaken, in 1984. In his writing, Renan tells people he wants to look at why the nation exists. And he says this is because there is a desire to live together. Peace is one of our wishes is how we can live in peace. The issues and challenges that we face together as part of an international community must be resolved in using peaceful means. As a country, we wish to live in peace, in an atmosphere of peace. So, as an opening, the speakers, Dr. Dewa Gede Palguna, and Professor Bertus de Villiers, and are they here yet? Professor Dr. Topo Santoso, is he here? So they'll be with you in this short course, and they will discuss various topics which are considered to be important for us to contribute in today's short course. With this triggering mechanism, perhaps you can formulate the solution to all these complex issues which we will face in the coming future. At least there should be some contribution that we produce as a path forward and our proposal for implementing this short course. Anything that has a potential for conflict despite conflict, if we continue communications and dialogues, hopefully we will be able to understand each other, help support each other, and with this spirit of mutual care as fellow human beings. I have high expectations that today's event will be of benefit to you, not the least which for our personal development, as we are the backbone of the future. That is all from me. I am sure that the speakers who will enrich, refine, broaden, and elaborate on the various ideas and thoughts. And this is our mutual contribution, and hopefully today's event will be of benefit to you. This is part of our role in the development of the younger generation. Finally, together, religious greetings, peace be upon us all. This AACC International Short Course is hereby officially open. That is all. Religious greetings, peace be upon us all.
Mohon untuk tetap di atas panggung.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Please stay on stage for a photo session.
Invite all speakers and participants of the short course for a group photo. Please come on stage. All speakers and participants, please to join a group photo. Free marks, please. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Once again to His Excellency Dr. Wahiduddin Adams for his speech. And thank you, everyone, all speakers and participants for the photo group. You may be seated, and we will continue to the next agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, we now enter the session 1 of the short course. The session of the short course will be led by our moderator. Well, he is a substitute registrar of the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia. He started working at the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia since 2005 and started his career as a substitute registrar from 2010 until now. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, we would like to invite our moderator today. Please welcome Mr. Eri Satria Pamungkas.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Firstly, I would like to say that I cannot start this session alone, so I would like to invite Dr. E. Dewa Gede Palguna and Professor Bertus de Villiers to join me on the stage so we can begin our session already. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to say welcome and to our fellow participants, and thank you for being here with us today in the first session of the AACC International Short Course of 2022. And in this first session, please allow me to guide you through the discussion and presentation so that we could complete the session according to the schedule, because we have a very tight schedule, and there's also another session after this, and there's also another ceremony in the afternoon. So I would like you to participate in this session and follow me through this session, and we can actually achieve what we are planning to do here today. And already with us today, there are already two well-established experts that will share their knowledge, experience, and expertise with us in this class or in this hall, I guess, because it doesn't look like a classroom anymore. I mean, actually, almost every short course there we have a classroom shape, not like this. And one of the speakers is the Honorable Dr. E. Dewa Gede Palguna, one of a prominent figure regarding the establishment of Indonesian Constitutional Court. And we also have Professor Bertus de Villiers with us today. And he's a member of the Australian Judiciary of the State Administrative Tribunal of Western Australia. Also a well-known expert in the areas of minority rights, decentralization, human rights, and land reform. I would like to say that during this session, each speaker will deliver his presentation for about 15 minutes each. And after that, we got two participants that have prepared response or discussion pointers regarding the presentation. Among us today we have Ms. Firdaus binti Muhammad Isa from Malaysia, and she is a Deputy Registrar from Federal Court of Malaysia. And also we have Mrs. Francisca, a Substitute Court Registrar from Indonesian Constitutional Court. Both of them got about 7 minutes each to spark the discussion. And after that, if we still had time, I would like to give the opportunity to all the participants to ask questions, confirmation, or even want to share something regarding the topic for today's session. Okay, for the first speaker, as intended by the schedule, I would like to invite Dr. E. Dewa Gede Palguna, or as I always call him, Bapak Palguna. Bapak means father or sir, or something that we say if we honor someone older than us, and we used to call him like that way in the office. Some well-known facts about Bapak Palguna is that he was appointed as a Constitutional Court Justice, first time in 2003, or when the court was first established. And then he got appointed again in 2015 up to 2020. So it can be said that he could represent the classic version of a constitutional court and the much modern version of the court. So you can imagine the extent of his experience and knowledge that he could share with us today. So now please, Bapak, I invite you to deliver your presentation, and please the class is yours, or at least 15 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Eri. I'm very honored to be here with you today. Although we don't have many times to discuss such valuable matters. Yeah, I would like to try, I'll try to maximize my 15 minutes in my presentation, so we can, hopefully, we have more time for an oral discussion between me and all the participants. Distinguished speakers and all participants of this short course, I would like to present my short and succinct presentation, Ensuring Social Justice Principles for Peaceful Society, is from Indonesian perspective, I mean. Let me first, I would like to introduce my opening statement that ensuring social justice is one of the paramount foundations of the Republic of Indonesia, because it is part of our constitutional obligations as well as part of the state's foundation. Preamble, why it is called part of our constitutional obligation? The preamble of our constitution, or the so-called Constitution of 1945, paragraph 4, clearly said that, let me quote, subsequent thereto, to form a government of the state of Indonesia, which shall protect the whole nation of Indonesia and the entire motherland of Indonesia, and to advance public welfare, to educate the nation life, and to participate in the maintenance of the world order based on the independence, perpetual peace, and social justice. The national independence of Indonesia shall be elaborated in the Constitution of the States of Indonesia, which shall be structured in the form of the Republic of Indonesia, with people's sovereignty based on belief in God, the Almighty, just and civilized humanity, the unity of Indonesia, and democracy with the guidance of wisdom in the Assembly or representation, and by realizing social justice for all the people of Indonesia. From the perspective of state foundation, Pancasila, our state foundation, is the state foundation of Indonesia. The term Pancasila refers to 5 basic principles constituting the foundation, which I expressly stated in the preamble of the country's constitution I mentioned above. First, belief in God the Almighty, just and civilized humanity, the unity of Indonesia, democracy with the guidance of wisdom in the Assembly of Representation, and social justice for all the people of Indonesia. But the problem is, what does it mean by social justice? There is no universally accepted definition and or scope of social justice. If we look at from the historical perspective, historically speaking, the majority of experts and social activists agree that the problem of social justice can be traced back to the era of industrial revolution in the early age of 19. It created, quote unquote, social stratification in society between those who were rich and those who are poor. And of course, the sharp and keep widening gap between the two. By then, those who supported the idea of social justice at first focused their attention primarily on 3 leading issues: capital, property, and distribution of wealth. Entering the middle of the 20th century, however, the problem of social justice developed wider than the earlier one, which was emphasized on economic issues so as to include various social problems such as environment, race, gender, and all other kind of injustices and their causes. And at the same time, efforts in realizing social justice also developed from efforts that previously solely taken by the nation states or governments to a wider dimension so as to include humanity in a universal sphere. The problem of social justice might exist practically in relation with any aspect of society where injustices may arise as the result of prejudices or unjust policies. Yeah, I think it's still happen up to this very days. Yeah. The type of social injustice can be figured in two categories, though they sometimes codependent. First, intersocial treatment, and secondly, unequal government regulation. The former covers treatment towards group or groups of society driven by personal suspicion and prejudices. And these suspicions and prejudices frequently emerge in various sociological categories such as race, gender, age, sexual orientation, religion, nationality, physical and mental capacities. While the latter, unequal government regulation, covers laws and regulations which intentionally or unintentionally create conditions that hamper, limit, or deny, or even deny access of a group or groups to equal opportunity and natural resources in relation with other groups of society. These laws and regulations, explicitly or impliedly, create conditions of social injustice. Let's now we move to principle of social justice. I'm sorry if I present my presentation fast because of the time. It's only 15 minutes, but that's fine. Despite the lack of an agreed definition and or understanding pertaining to what social justice experts and experts are in agreement on minimum principles that must be attributed to social justice, that is human rights, participation, access, and equity. Human rights, why this principle is so important? Because there is a strong belief that human rights approach is pivotal when working for social justice. Up to this very day, social justice is still mostly associated with social and economic rights. But experts believe it will become more powerful when it encompasses all human rights. It is said that social justice goals are clearer when framed with international human rights standards. That's the main benefit. In addition, by framing social justice issues as human rights issues, it will give more pressure on governments and institutions to address their failings. How many minutes left my time? Still many minutes, okay, thank you. The second principle, participation. A principle of participation means that everyone should be able to participate in the process that affect their lives. All individuals must be given opportunity to participate because injustice is complex and multifaceted. Diversity has significant role here. Hence, increased participation means increased diversity and it will accordingly increase alternative solutions for the multifaceted social injustice. The third principle, access. When we talk about access, the principle of access means that to build and to achieve a just society, there must be principle that services and resources are available to all, not just a few. In other words, everyone must have equal access to services and resources. Because the failure to fulfill this principle means widening equality gap in a society since only those who are already privileged get the resources they need to improve their lives. And the last principle, equity. Equity means fairness or justice or rightness. Equity is different from equality, but the two is related. It is said that equality is the goal, while equity is the method by which societies achieve that goal. Since every society has its disenfranchised groups, the equity is said to be achieved when specific needs of these disenfranchised groups are addressed. Now we come to my last point of my presentation. What is the role of the Constitutional Court here? Generally speaking, all the principles of social justice mentioned above have been enshrined and reflected in the provisions of the Indonesian Constitution, the so-called Constitution of 1945. According to our legal system, the provisions of the Constitution have to be elaborated further and implemented by laws and regulations, including those principles of social justice, of course. So the problem now is how to ensure that the laws and regulations have properly elaborated and implemented those principles. Now, as far as laws are concerned, if there is a law that fails to address one of those principles of social justice, those who has the constitutional interest, even a single citizen of the country, may directly bring the law to the Constitutional Court and ask the court to review the constitutionality of that law. If the Constitutional Court finds that the petitioner's arguments are reasoned, the court will declare the law unconstitutional, and at the same time, the law will lose its legally binding power. But the problem is that in many cases, violations to constitutional rights in general and to principles of social justice in particular occur not because there are unconstitutional laws, but because of acts or omissions of public officials in such a manner so as to infringe a citizen's constitutional rights derived from those principles. In several countries, we know in several countries, such cases may be brought to Constitutional Court in the form of constitutional complaint cases. But unfortunately, here in Indonesia, the Constitutional Court is not yet equipped with competence to adjudicate such cases. Maybe this will trigger another discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bapak Palguna, for this very short presentation and very quick presentation. And please give another round of applause for Bapak Palguna here, because he's also the true host of this event, because Bapak Palguna was born and raised in Bali Island itself. And next, I would like to invite Professor Bertus de Villiers to deliver his presentation. Probably most of you already know, but I would like to point a little bit of more additional information about Professor Bertus de Villiers, is that besides as a member of State Administrative Tribunal of Western Australia, he's also a professor of law school of the University of Johannesburg, and also professor of law in the School of Curtin University in Australia. And you may also wonder in what extent that Professor Bertus will share with us today. Then I already read the papers and read the presentation, and it's going to be very interesting, and I know that most of you will enjoy. Because the time is very limited, I would like to strictly invite Professor Bertus de Villiers to deliver his presentation around 15 minutes, okay, then the class is yours now for 15 minutes, Professor Bertus. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you very much. Can I just ask, I sent some slides. Are the slides going to be on or not? Not. There the slides are. You can just leave it there and I will show you when to change it. Chair, thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor to be here with you. I will start where the previous speaker ended, because he said, what is the role of a court? And I think in the modern society, we must ask that, especially in young and emerging democracies, because often in the more established democracies, the court has a certain function principally to adjudicate disputes. But in more recent democracies and emergent democracies, there's often more expected of a court. A court is expected to transform society, which is quite different from traditional democracies. If you go to the United Kingdom or to Australia or to New Zealand, the court there is expected to principally adjudicate disputes. But if you go to young and emerging democracies, such as Indonesia, such as South Africa, the court is expected to be an agent of change. And so one must ask yourself, wherever you come from, what do you expect of a court? Now, in literature, they refer to this as transformative constitutionalism, where the court uses its power to transform society, to make society better, to achieve social justice. But this is not as simple as it seems, because a court that exceeds its power will land itself in trouble, because as soon as you exceed your power, you get in conflict with the legislative and executive branches of government, or you lose support from the population. And so although a court must use its power to transform society, a court must always respect there are three organs of state. There's a legislature, there's an executive, and there's the judiciary, and the one should not move in the field of the other. In the previous session, we heard somebody ask, what techniques do you use to interpret your constitution? Because if one looks at the constitution just as a black letter document, as they say, then you simply interpret the constitution for what it is. If, however, you look at your constitution, as our previous speaker said, as a constitution that promotes social justice, then it means there's a purpose of your constitution. And when you hand down judgments, that purpose must be served. And so that can lead then to transformative constitutionalism, because it means you not only adjudicate a dispute, you adjudicate a dispute with a certain purpose in mind, and that is social justice. That is not what you find in many constitutions. And that is what my paper is about. My paper says that all courts adjudicate disputes. I mean, that's why a court is there. But not all courts transform their society. Few courts actually transform their society. And I'm going to speak to you about 4 examples of courts that have transformed their society. And hopefully that also inspires you in the courts where you work about what can be done. Now, the very first major judgment of a court that transformed society was in the United States with the Marbury and Madison judgment. The Constitution of the United States does not provide that the Supreme Court can nullify legislation. It doesn't provide that. But in the Marbury judgment, the court clothed itself with that power. The court said, implied in the Constitution of the United States, there's a power to nullify a law that is in breach with the Constitution. And that is what is called nowadays constitutionalism. But that was the first time that a court made such a decision. And today, many of us just assume that courts have this function, but that was a major transformative step that was taken in that case. But I'm going to refer to you, and we can go to the slides dealing with the case studies because I'm limited for time. The heading is examples. You can just keep it there. I'm going to refer to you to 4 major case studies where courts have transformed societies. India, Germany, Australia, and South Africa. And I'm going to show you how the courts use their powers to transform those societies. The first example, that of India. The Constitution of India has a chapter in it dealing with fundamental rights, but it also has in it a chapter dealing with directive principles of social policy. Now, those directive principles of social policy are not legally enforceable. They are just there to guide the courts, very much like the principle social justice is included in the Indonesian constitution. But what the courts of India did was it used this non-binding chapter on directive principles in order to give content to the Bill of Rights. And in the process, they transformed India. They looked at, for example, the way that minimum wages could be protected, how property could be protected, how the homeless could be protected, how the environment could be protected. So there's a whole range of cases over the past 50 years where the Court of India has used these non-binding principles of the Constitution to give content to the Bill of Rights. And that is quite unique. Just to show you how transformative it has been, Ireland has exactly the same chapter on directive principles in its constitution. It has had no impact on Ireland, that chapter. But in India, the court used it as a mechanism for change. And this is an example that developing countries such as yours and where I come from can use, how those courts have, within the limits of the power of the Constitution, changed their society. That's the first example, the example of India. The second example is the example of Germany. Germany, as they came out of the Second World War, created a federation. And they had to work out how are these federal entities going to interact with one another. The state governments, the federal government, what is going to be the relationship between them? Because at that stage, in constitutional theory, federations were built on what is called competitive federalism. There was a competition between the states and the federal government. So if you look at, for example, at the United States, that is known as a country where there is competitive federalism. The states and the national government are constantly competing with one another. The German Constitutional Court, in one of its very first decisions it handed down, used the term Bundestreue. Now, Bundestreue doesn't even appear in the Constitution of Germany. It's not like social justice that appears in the Constitution of Indonesia. Bundestreue is a word that, if you translate it into English, means federal friendship. So the Constitutional Court said, for our Constitution to work, there must be federal friendship. There mustn't be competition. There must be a partnership. And so Germany then started what is called as Cooperative Federalism, which today is seen as the standard format of federalism for all new democracies, Cooperative Federalism, where the states and the federal government work together instead of being in conflict. But this decision was handed down because of the creative nature of the German Constitutional Court. And that is how they used a word that doesn't even appear in the Constitution of Germany. They used that to give content to the Constitution of Germany, and they transformed Germany in the process. That's the second example. The third example is that of Australia. Australia, when Australia was settled as a new country, Australians did not recognize, the British did not recognize indigenous people, Aboriginal people. They said Aboriginal people were not capable of negotiating with a new colony. They did not have a legal structure. They did not have a social organization. And so the British simply settled Australia. There was never a treaty between the British and the Aboriginal people of Australia. And this lasted for more than 200 years. So for 200 years, Australia was regarded, I use the Latin term, terra nullius. It belonged to no one. Even though there were people living there, the legal theory was that Australia belonged to no one. Then in 1992, the High Court of Australia said, this can't go on. These people have what is called native title. They had native title at the time, they had legal systems, and therefore, as of today, 1992, we are going to recognize that. That radically changed Australia, radically. 200 years of constitutional tradition was just thrown out of the window. And today, Australia recognizes native title. This is another example of how a court saw an injustice and how a court could no longer accept that injustice. And then it used its power to transform the society. The example of Australia. Fourth example I'm referring to is that of South Africa. South Africa has a modern constitution. I was part of the drafting of that constitution. If you read the South African constitution, it reads like any other constitution of a modern country. But the court, when the court started interpreting the constitution, used the African word Ubuntu. Now, Ubuntu is very much like the Indonesian word Pancasila. It's an inherent value that is not in the constitution. It's not there, but it is in the African culture. And Ubuntu recognizes the humaneness of people. So in a certain sense, it can be compared to many of the big faiths of the world, the love that you must show to your neighbor, the tolerance that you must show to one another. But Ubuntu is a word that is unique to South Africa. And so the court said, this constitution of ours must be interpreted within the spirit of Ubuntu. And then the court used that Ubuntu to abolish the death penalty, to look after the rights of refugees, to look after the rights of gay and lesbian people, to look at criminal justice, etc. So without this word being in the Constitution, the court discovered it and used it to transform the society. So what am I saying in conclusion to you? Transformative constitutionalism has been with us for many years, for centuries, where some courts have used their powers to transform their societies. Not all courts. Some courts are black letter courts. All they do is they interpret a dispute. But few courts have been transformative, where they have changed their society. But a court can only change a society if it works with the legislature and the executive, because a court whose decisions are not abided, that means nothing. That leads to a constitutional crisis. So when a court transforms the society, it must do so within limits, knowing that it can only go as far as the constitutional powers would allow it. Constitutional transformation can take place at many stages. In Australia, constitutional transformation was indigenous rights. In South Africa, constitutional transformation is socio-economic rights. In Germany, constitutional transformation was the federal system. Each nation has an issue that burns that nation. Each nation is unique. And it's that burning issue that a constitutional court can use in order to transform their society. I close with something that was said by one of the prominent South African judges, Justice L.B. Sachs. He said the following: as far from the law constituting a barricade of injustice that had to be stormed, because at that stage that he wrote, apartheid was a legal system. And apartheid, in a certain sense, was a barricade to justice. It prevented justice. He said, now the law has torn down the freedom. It became the primary instrument accomplishing a peaceful revolution. So through law, South Africa was changed, it was transformed, and that is also happening in some of the other developing countries, not in all, but in many. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Professor. And please give another round of applause to our Professor Bertus. And after we have listened to and pay attention to this presentation from both of the speakers, now I would like to invite Ms. Firdaus from Malaysia to give a comment or maybe a question or maybe clarification regarding the presentation or something else. Maybe she want to share an experience to share with the speakers related to the topic. Please, Ms. Firdaus.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. A very good afternoon to distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, allow me to express my appreciation on such a well-written paper by our learned speaker, Dr. E. Dewa Galde Paguna and Professor Bertus. I would like to comment first on the presentation by our learned speaker, Dr. E. Dewa, on Indonesian perspective to safeguard social justice. I would like to comment on the last presentation, on the last part of the presentation, where it highlights that in cases involving the act and omission of public official, that depriving the system of social justice, the Constitutional Court of Indonesia didn't have the jurisdiction to hear the matter. And in my humble view, shouldn't some amendments need to be considered to overcome this problem? Because I suppose, comparing to my experience in Malaysian court, there are a lot of cases involving public administrative law as compared to cases involving unconstitutional law. So this is my comment, and maybe later the doctor can further explain on this, whether there is a proposal to amend or not. And with regard to second presentation by learned Professor Bertus, actually the presentation is quite lengthy. I received the real paper, it's 27 pages. But I would like to highlight the main highlight of the paper, which is the 4 case studies by from Indian court, which is the Directive Principle of State Policy, and Germany by the implied term of Bundesrepublik, the Federal Friendship, and also the recognition of title land in Australian cases. And the last one is South Africa, the principle of Ubuntu. I would like to add, which I think maybe because there's no time for Professor Tuni to explain further, with regard to the Mabo judgment decided in 1992, the impact of the decision was that after the declaration of the pronunciation of the judgment, the state decided to enacted the Native Title Act in 1993, whereby since then the native title has been recognized and thousands of native title agreements have been concluded. So I think that is a very apt example of transformational constitutionalism. Okay. I share. I think that transformational constitutionalism is something what we call in Malaysian called judicial activism. We do have that. We have a few cases, but I think since the time is very limited, maybe after this we can have a talk and discuss on our experience. We may not have the perfect formula to address and resolve social justice issue. Regardless, it is my humble view and that it is important for the public to have access to justice, and judges should play a vital and active role in upholding fundamental rights enshrined in our respective constitution. The concept of transformative constitutionalism introduced by Professor was indeed an extension of judicial activism to me, and I think calls for further study and research to be conducted on his alternative jurisprudence. With that, I end my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Firdaus. For both speakers, maybe you would hold your response, and the next one that will give a comment or clarification or question, or maybe want to share another experience related to the topic is Mrs. Francisca, I'm sorry, from the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia. Please, Mrs.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, Pak Palguna. How are you? Nice to meet you again. Good afternoon, Professor Bertus. Let me welcome you into Indonesia. I hope you can enjoy Bali, one of our beautiful island. Okay, my name is Francisca, but you can call me Icha, as my college used to call me. Thank you for both of you clear explanation. I really enjoy your presentation, and your paper is such comprehensive explanation and enlightened me about principle of social justice and transformative constitution. I'm not in the capacity to respond your paper, but I'm here want to ask question regarding to your paper. My first question is to Professor Bertus. I agree with the statement that the court can be an agent of transformation, which will ultimately give direction to the state in carrying out its obligation and achieving its goal. I will relate it to the global issue of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is changing the order of human life around the world and changing the order and rule of law and regulation in various aspects of life because of the need for a quick adjustment from the state to the basic need of society or human right or human being, namely the right to health and the right to life. The state, in this case, carry out its obligation to ensure the life of its people, especially in terms of health, which of course is based on the constitutional of each country. But on the other hand, as explained in your paper, Professor, that the Constitution is often a collection of soulless black ink, so that in emergency situations, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the policy taken by the state, in this case the government, can cause conflict with the Constitution itself. For example, in Indonesia, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit Indonesia, the executive and legislative drafted regulation related to the use of the state budget. The law regulates exception for the government in the use of the state budget during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's because the government imagined an increasing need due to the state obligation to provide health insurance and social welfare to the community due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the regulation doesn't stipulate the time limit for the validity of exception to the use of the state budget, so that it is contrary to the principle of justice and legal certainty guaranteed in the Constitution. And there are still many more cases caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. My question is, based on your experience as a judge in the State Administrative Tribunal of Western Australia, what things have been done by the court in Australia that can be categorized as a transformative constitution related to the COVID-19 pandemic? I think all. Thank you, Professor. And my second question to Pak Palguna. In several times, the Constitutional Court of Indonesia has made change to the constitutional interpretation of its decision. Based on your presentation and your experience as a judge, what is social justice principle can be used to rationalize the change of the decision of Constitutional Court? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Francisca. And Professor Bertus and Pak Palguna, I don't know if you want to respond immediately or you want to give another opportunity to other participants to ask questions. It is okay. All right. And I would like to invite other participants here to ask question or clarification, or maybe want to share something regarding to the topic to our speaker today. So I would like to invite maybe about three questions, and please raise your hand and mention your name and institution. Is there any? Yes, please. Please mention your name and your institution.
Sorry, my name is Muhammad Aizuddin. I'm from the Federal Court of Malaysia. I have a question for Professor Bertus. Well, you mentioned about transformative constitutionalism. In your study or in your years of research, for example, have you come across any case decided by the court that have encroached or usurped the power of the other organs of the states? For example, the legislative and also the legislative and the executive. For example, in India, when they have the suo motu, when they can begin the case, the court by its own motion can begin. So how is that? Is that a transformative constitutionalism as you regard it? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other question? Yes, from that table. Please mention your name and your institution.
Thank you, Mas Eri. Thank you to Pak Palguna, Dewa Gede Palguna, and to Professor Bertus for his great presentation. One question for Prof. Bertus. It's very interesting to talk about just judicial transformation. As far as I know, judicial transformation is a judicial service that is more for justice-seeking people, which was Prof. Bertus explains the principle of Ubuntu in South Africa. Have the world's courts transformed their judiciary in their representative countries? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilma. Any other question? No. We still have time. The committee said that we can extend our time until 15:55 or 5 minutes before 4 p.m. So we're going to use that time to listen to responding from our speaker today. If you want to respond from the questions and clarification for both discussion and other participants, please, I would like to invite Professor Bertus to respond from the question and clarification. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the excellent questions. I mean, I don't have the answers on all these things. We're all just searching for the answers. But let me just make a few remarks on what you have asked. First, as far as the Mabo decision is concerned, it's very interesting, the point that was made when the High Court of Australia recognized native title. There was a strong opinion in South Africa, in Australia, that Parliament should override the decision by legislation. Yes, and ultimately Parliament decided they won't do it. They will respect the decision. Now that decision, I'm not sure if you would understand what it means to overrule 200 years of constitutional tradition. It was like a peaceful revolution in Australia. But this is where the point comes in of respect for the rule of law. Now, respect for the rule of law is not a given. Societies struggle for it. So if in your country there is perhaps not always respect for the rule of law, just know that if you go to the United States, which has the oldest written constitution, just 10 months ago, Congress was invaded by persons who did not respect the rule of law. So all of us, whether we are from young democracies or old democracies, it's a continual process to encourage people to respect the rule of law. And that is what was demonstrated in Mabo. Let me just say something about judicial activism. There's always a risk in judges going too far, because one must remember judges are not elected. Now that has a benefit, but it also has a deficit. The judges are probably the people who are most removed from society, from any profession. I mean, that's why people say judges sit in an ivory tower. So sometimes it makes it easier for them because they're in an ivory tower, but sometimes it also means they don't really understand what goes on outside of the tower. So generally, I think if judges transform the society, it mustn't be because of one single judge wanting to hand down certain judgment. There must be a consensus in the society that our society needs to be transformed. So the judicial decisions must be part of a process. It mustn't just be one judge wanting to be activist. There was the question about constitutionalism and COVID. The point I will make there is that there's no country with an ideal state of law. That is why there are everyday cases in high courts, and there are poor people in the world, and there are environment being destroyed around us. So the striving towards a just and peaceful society is just part of our lives. You never reach an endpoint. It's a journey. You never get there. But to get to your question about COVID, that was perhaps transformative. I'm not sure it was a transformative decision, but in Australia, one of the states during COVID locked itself up. So Australia became an island in an island. Australia is an island, but within the island, one of the states said, we don't allow anybody into our state. Nobody comes in. Now, this was a fundamental principle against any country. You can't just exclude citizens from traveling, from commerce flowing, and so on. And so this case went to the High Court. And the High Court found that in light of the nature of this pandemic, there was an adequate rational reason for this state to exclude itself. And the reasons the court used were proportionate. That's always the key test. They were proportionate to what was attempted to be secured, and that was public health. So that was perhaps a decision that I can refer to. Let me just make one further point, and that was the question whether there are examples of the courts encroaching, as it was called, on the powers of the legislature or the executive. Yes, of course, there are many such examples. I mean, let's look at the United States. In the United States, there was until the mid-1950s a constitution, a philosophy, what they called separate but equal schools. So racial groups were put in different schools. So black couldn't go to white and white couldn't go to black. And the theory was that as long as the schools are equal, you can segregate black and white. And then the Supreme Court of America, in the Brown case, Brown versus the Education Board of Topeka, said, in separateness, there's inherently unequalness. And they abolished separate education. Now, this was going right into the powers of the legislature and right into the powers of the executive. But this was the beginning of the civil rights movement internationally, the Brown versus the Education Board of Topeka case, a major case. Another case in America that you would all know of is the Wade case, the abortion case, which in the 1970s, the court found something in regard to the rights of women to abortion, which was not authorized by Congress. And so for years in America, there's been a concern that a certain right was recognized by the court, but that right was not necessarily authorized by Congress. And then recently, of course, as you would know, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned that decision. So that shows you how careful judges must be. The Brown case, separate education, was never overturned. People accepted that. The Wade case was overturned. So it's a fine line for a court to walk when their decisions are accepted, when they push social boundaries, and when the decisions are rejected, a very fine line. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Professor Bertus de Villiers. And next, Pak Alguna, your views.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Verdal from Malaysia. When we are talking about the cases of constitutional complaint, I think although we lack the lack of constitutional provision to solve the problem, I think, as we know in theory at least, that how to complete the Constitution is by way of constitutional interpretation, by our judicial interpretation, of course. So I think it is about time for the Constitutional Court of Indonesia to make a kind of judicial interpretation concerning the cases of constitutional complaint cases, because theoretically speaking, constitutional complaint cases has the same root with the judicial review case. The only difference is that the object of judicial review is norms, but the object of the constitutional complaint is acts or omission of state official or public officials. But the result is, I think it's the very same, because the result is the deprived constitutional rights of citizens. So I, in my dissertation, my PhD dissertation, suggests that when we are waiting the formal amendment of our constitution, it needs a political, a strong political will. But we can interpret our law by amending our law on constitutional court, by interpreting the term judicial review in such a manner so as to include constitutional complaint cases. And it is acceptable, I think, theoretically, but it's not done up to this very minute. Yeah. The second question from Icha, I fondly called Francisca as Icha. Well, Icha, when we are talking about the decision or the ruling of the Constitutional Court, exactly we are talking about the constitutional interpretations. So by constitutional interpretations, in my opinion, it's not only how to constitutional, how to, what does it mean? How to measure one act or a norm, whether it's matched with one or other provision of the Constitution. But the constitutional interpretation means that how we understand the substance, the very spirit, the very spirit of the Constitution, and how to achieve its goal. So when we read, or I mean the court reads a constitutional a law, in the case of judicial review, I think the court should consider not not only what the words of the law, but also what is unspoken within that words. And it is if it interpreted with the goals of our Constitution, the understanding of our Constitution, whether it is still matched or not. And you should remember that it is constitutionally written in the Article 24, paragraph 1 of our Constitution, which says the judicial power shall be an independent power in order to perform the judiciary, in order to uphold law and justice. What does it mean by justice? Justice can be a delicate constitutional interpretation when we are talking about how a law elaborate justice in our daily lives. I think that's my answer. What is my theoretical answer to such a delicate question from Icha? Thank you, Eri.
All right, thank you, Professor Bertus and Bapak Palguna. Please give another round of applause for Bapak Palguna and for all the participants that have actively joining our discussion for today. Now, that concludes our first session for this international short course, and some points that we have to remember that from this discussion, that most courts have responsibility to interpret the text of the Constitution, and or to give colors to the black text of the Constitution. Some basic principles even did not appear in the Constitution at all. And in Indonesia, Pancasila established as basic principles that guides the state, so that every kind of transformation in Indonesia must not deny any principles established by the Pancasila. And the Constitutional Court are established to have for the role to guarantee that by mechanism of judicial review, that every other transformation or interpretation of law is not is related to the Pancasila. And maybe someday in the Indonesian Constitutional Court will have another sort of mechanism by the constitutional complaint mechanism, and hopefully it won't take very long. And of course, most of you, if you're not satisfied enough in listening to the presentation from Bapak Palguna and Professor Bertus de Villiers, especially from my colleagues from other countries and other institutions, you can always invite both of them to your institution, to deliver their presentation in your institution, maybe sometimes next year or this year. And don't forget to invite the moderators also. And that's all from me. And I would like to thank you for your attention and for your cooperation in this session. And I would like to return the class to Master of the Ceremony. Thank you, Miss.
Thank you. Once again, give applause, ladies and gentlemen. That's a very interesting presentation and discussion as well. Once again, thank you for Mr. Eri Satria Pamungkas for moderating the first session. And thank you so much for our speakers as well. Dr. Palguna, thank you. And Professor Bertus also, thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the short course session 1 has been completed. And before we proceed to the second sessions, now let us have around 15 minutes coffee break, and the coffee break can be enjoyed at the foyer area. So please, we'll be back to this ballroom again to continue to the second session at 4:10 p.m. Thank you so much, and see you at the second sessions of today's short course.
Using this tire.
Teman-teman, kalian tuh nggak selama ini apa aja sih yang udah dilakuin sama Mahkamah Konstitusi? Jadi melalui putusannya, Mahkamah Konstitusi memiliki menguji undang-undang terhadap undang-undang dasar. Nah, Mahkamah Konstitusi juga menunjukkan kontribusi untuk menegakkan supremasi hukum, menguatkan demokrasi, sekaligus mengembangkan kesadaran dan kultur berkonstitusi warga negara. Juga nih, di antara putusan perkara pengujian undang-undang banyak banget yang dinilai sebagai landmark decision. Landmark decision adalah putusan yang monumental dalam memberikan perlindungan hukum dan memulihkan hak konstitusi warga negara yang telah dijamin oleh Undang-Undang Dasar. Contohnya adalah hak keberatan anak di luar kawin dengan ayah biologisnya yang diputus pada tahun 2012. MK memulihkan hak anak di luar kawin dengan menyatakan konstitusional ketentuan dalam Undang-Undang Perkawinan yang menyatakan bahwa anak yang lahir di luar kawin hanya memiliki hubungan keperdataan dengan ibunya atau dengan keluarga ibunya. Tentu saja ketentuan itu tidak memberikan perlindungan hukum bagi anak di luar kawin loh. Oleh karena itu, MK menyatakan bahwa anak yang lahir di luar kawin bisa memiliki hubungan keperdataan dengan laki-laki yang dapat dibuktikan dengan ilmu pengetahuan dan teknologi melalui tes DNA dari ayah biologisnya.
Nah, selanjutnya ada putusan MK yang dinilai memulihkan hak masyarakat hukum adat terhadap angkutan adat. Nah, pada tahun 2013 dalam putusan mengenai pengujian undang-undang kehutanan dinyatakan bahwa menempatkan angkutan adat sebagai bagian dari hutan negara merupakan suatu bentuk dari pengabaian terhadap hak masyarakat. Oleh karena itu, Mahkamah Konstitusi memutuskan bahwa hutan adat merupakan hutan yang berada dalam wilayah masyarakat hukum adat. Jadi bukan lagi hutan negara yang berada dalam wilayah masyarakat hukum adat.
Selain itu, juga ada putusan berikutnya yaitu putusan yang berkenaan dengan hak asasi manusia atas air, di mana tepat pada tahun 2019, teman-teman, Undang-Undang Sumber Daya Air ini dinyatakan inkonstitusional secara keseluruhan oleh Mahkamah Konstitusi. Jadi, akses terhadap air ini merupakan bagian dari hak asasi manusia dan oleh karenanya, Konstitusi mengamanatkan hak penguasa negara atas air. Putusan Mahkamah Konstitusi menegaskan bahwa Undang-Undang Sumber Daya Air ini tidak dapat menjamin terwujudnya hak penguasaan negara atas air karena itu dapat membuka peluang privatisasi dan komersialisasi pihak swasta atas pengelolaan sumber daya air. Dan komersialisasi pihak swasta atas pengelolaan sumber daya air ini jelas merugikan hak konstitusional warga negara.
Nah, teman-teman, ternyata putusan MK ini monumental dalam melindungi dan memulihkan hak konstitusional bagi penghayat kepercayaan. Dalam Undang-Undang Administrasi Kependudukan dinyatakan bahwasanya kartu keluarga dan KTP elektronik memuat mengenai kolom agama. Namun,
Khusus bagi warga negara penghayat kepercayaan, ternyata kolom agama tersebut dikosongkan loh teman-teman. MK menyatakan dikosongkannya kolom agama di kartu keluarga dan KTP elektronik bagi penghayat kepercayaan ternyata telah menimbulkan diskriminasi dan kerugian konstitusional bagi warga negara penghayat kepercayaan terhadap Tuhan Yang Maha Esa. Pada tahun 2017, MK memutuskan kolom agama dalam kartu keluarga dan KTP elektronik penghayat kepercayaan terhadap Tuhan Yang Maha Esa tidak lagi dikosongkan, melainkan dicantumkan penghayat kepercayaan tanpa merinci kepercayaan yang dianut.
Nah, selanjutnya pada putusan Mahkamah Konstitusi yang satu ini juga merupakan tonggak penting Pancasila menjadi dasar pengujian undang-undang.
Ladies and gentlemen, please kindly be seated. We will continue to the second sessions of today's short course. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, we have entered the short course session 2. Well, same as before, this session will also led by the moderator. He is a senior court officer at the Indonesian Constitutional Court. He started working at the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia since 2003 and started his career as a substitute clerk at the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia from 2010 until now. Ladies and gentlemen, he has an LLB at Muhammadiyah University, Yogyakarta, and a Master of Constitutional Law degree from the University of Indonesia. As a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Law, International Islamic University, Malaysia, he also teaches undergraduate courses in various law subjects, including constitutional law, administrative law, comparative constitutional law, and human rights as well. Besides, he has authored several books, ladies and gentlemen, including the Indonesian Constitutional Code and Living Constitutions. In addition, he has contributed more than 50 publications and papers, published as chapters in books, law journals, and local and international conferences. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please give big applause to our moderator, Mr. Hani Adani. Now I give the floor to Mr. Moderator to the short course. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to invite our speaker, Professor Dr. Topo Santoso, please. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, good afternoon. Rahajeng siang in Bali language. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bali. Greeting from Bali to all participants, and also welcome to our speaker, Professor Topo Santoso, also my lecturer in University of Indonesia. I hope all of you in good condition. So our topic for this season is election for the welfare of the people. So you see that the election is one of the significant issue in every country. To make constitutional democratic state, election become the fundamental thing that every country must fulfill. As one of the essential constitutional democratic state in Asia and also in South Asia, Indonesia started organizing free and fair election in 1999 after the era of reformasi. After the election result, Indonesia finally amended the constitution of 1945 that governed supremacy of constitution, the rule of law, the separation of power, human right, and constitutional right, and also established one of the important institution in the judiciary is Indonesian Court of Republic Indonesia. As you see that our court is the guardian of the constitution and also the guardian of democracy. So all indicators that I mentioned is for one aim, to make Indonesia become welfare state and to make Indonesia people more prosperous. So our speaker for this topic is Professor Dr. Topo Santoso. He is a lecturer in the Faculty of Law at University of Indonesia. He graduated from University of Indonesia for bachelor degree and master, and PhD from University of Malaya, Malaysia, because we have our president from Malaysia also here. And then Prof. Topo also has experience as a member of the election supervisor agency. In Indonesia we call Bawaslu, Badan Pengawas Pemilihan Umum, from 2003 until 2004. He also former Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Indonesia, from 2013 until 2017. Prof. Topo also has published more than 22 books and hundreds of articles and opinion. So I really hope all participants can open Google Scholar, open Academia, open ResearchGate, and then to read the article. And if you want to read the complete profile of Professor Topo, you can open website of Faculty of Law, University of Indonesia. So our speaker will deliver his speech about 20 minutes. And after that, we will continue to discussion and question and answer. So to Prof. Topo, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon for all participants. Thank you, Hani, for your very kind introduction for me. My topic this afternoon is ensuring election for the welfare of the people and Indonesian experience. I believe that my PowerPoint already, yeah. Okay. Okay, next slide please. Enggak, ini. Okay, this topic is quite very interesting, but quite difficult to answer. Ensuring election for the welfare of the people. I should start my introduction with the okay, thank you. I will start with some articles which discuss about the relation between election in one side and prosperity or welfare of the people in the other side. And in theory, we can see in several books and several journal articles that competitive elections create incentives for politicians to provide broad-based public goods. And there are several research regarding this issue, and I refer to books by Nelson. It mentioned that one quantitative research finds democracy increases spending, but has little or no impact on education and health outcomes. And another study, and this is using case studies, suggests that democratic politics generate weak or negative incentive for politicians to promote reforms. Democracy impacts on social services is much more, this is I should underline, the somewhat conclusion of this research, that democracy's impact on social services is much more complex, contingent, and nuanced that recent theorizing suggests. So it's not difficult to relate between election in one side and prosperity or welfare in the other side. I should mention here the one book, very important book in political studies by Robert Dahl in 2001. He provided 10 reasons. Next slide, please. 10 reasons why democracy is chosen. Yeah, the second, I think the second slide, yeah. Why democracy is chosen in many countries. There are 10 reasons. First, democracy helps to prevent the development of government by ruthless and devious autocracy class. The second reason, democracy guarantees its citizens with a number of human rights standards which are not provided and cannot be provided by non-democratic system. The third reason, democracy ensures greater personal freedom for its citizens compared to other possible alternatives. The fourth reason, democracy assists people in protecting their main interests. And the next reason, only a democratic government is capable of providing a great opportunities for people as possible to use their freedom of choice. The sixth reason, only a democratic government is capable of providing a great opportunities as possible to discharge moral responsibility. The seventh reason, democracy helps develop humanity more totally than other possible alternatives. And then I will go to the 10th reason, which is very important to our topic this afternoon. Countries with democratic government tend to be more prosperous than countries with non-democratic government. So Dahl mentioned this is not guarantee, but countries with democratic government tend to be more prosperous than non-democratic countries. One of the very important instrument of democracy would be elections. So I mentioned here Powell description about the relation between election and democracy. He mentioned that election are not the only instrument of democracy. They must be supported by other organizations and rules that encourage communication and cooperation. However, according to Powell, elections are critical democratic instruments. They claim of establishing a system that compels or greatly encourages the policymakers to pay attention to citizens. There is a widespread consensus that presence of competitive election more than any other features identifies a contemporary nation state as a democratic political system. So now I will come to the very core of my presentation about the relation between election or particularly about democracy and economic growth. Yeah. The effect of democracy on incomes and economic growth is uncertain. So there are several research, several articles and several books when discussing about the relation between election and between democracy and economic growth is uncertain about the relation. So that is not a guarantee, not certain that elections can guarantee the economic growth. But the findings of several research would be uncertain. The effect of democracy on income and economic growth is uncertain. On the one hand, election might build better institutions and improve governance, which in turn should increase growth. But on the other hand, instances where democracy leads to local elite capture, that local elites gain undue influence with adverse effect for the local community. The second conclusion with related to in Indonesia, we see that in several local election which not conducted in quite fair, and the candidates also has like a corrupt backgrounds. So there are several corruption cases in certain provinces and municipalities. The next slide, please. Regarding the relationship between democracy and economic welfare, I refer to Robert Dahl. He convincingly states that the experience in the 19th and 20th centuries demonstrates that democratic countries are prosperous and non-democratic countries are generally poor. This one opinion, yeah, of very important, of very well-known political scientists. But other opinion is very different with Robert Dahl, and I should mention Sorensen. He states that there is no direct relationship between the form of regime, democratic or authoritarian, and the results of development by simply reasoning that various types of democratic and authoritarian regimes have different development capacities. So again, there are no certainties. There are always two opinions about the relation between election or between democracy in one side and growth or prosperity in other sides. Next slide, please. The relationship between democracy and development has been extensively debated, as I mentioned before. The relationship between democracy and development has been extensively debated. Most cross-country analysis suggests that democracy has no robust impact on growth. But using within-country variations, some authors have recently shown that democracy positively affects the rate of growth, notably when transition to democracy is consolidated. Elections are the key institutional technology of democracy. As constituted elections have become more common, economic policy and government in developing countries have improved markedly. Now I will move to Indonesian situations as the main subject of this presentation. Can I move to another slide, please? Yeah. Election in Indonesia, and this is the very short introduction about election in Indonesia, as Hani already mentioned before. Next slide, please. We have the very first election, democratic election in 1955. and the next 2 years would be hopefully the other democratic elections. Yeah. In 1955, the people elect two kind of body. First is parliamentary elections, so the election to elect member of parliaments, and the second body would be constituent member. This body formulate our constitutions. And this is the only election during the Sukarno era, or we call it in Indonesia the odd order era. And during Suharto, presidential Suharto era, the election conducted in 1971 until 1997. So there are 6 elections, with called by many scientists as semi-democratic elections. Not fully democracy, but semi-democracy election. And after the step down of Suharto, there are several elections which regarded as democratic election, start in 1999 until the last one 2019, which elect parliamentary elections and also presidential, which elect the member of parliament and presidential and vice president. And next slide, please. I mentioned here one research, in around 8 years ago about the situation Indonesians on local elections, and what the relation between election and the welfare of the people, or the prosperity of the people. And as I mentioned before, that the relation again is uncertain. The issue of how democracy affects economic growth has received a great deal of interest. The effect of local election on local economic growth in Indonesia, how the relations, and this research reveal the findings. There have been large differences in economic growth between Indonesian districts, and there are also several case studies that suggest that government differs between districts, one district and other districts. However, there is no evidence that these differences are caused by differences in the degree of democracy. There is no general effect of direct local election on local economic growth in Indonesia. Again, the answer would be uncertain. In one district, there is a good result that the direct election of head of local government brings prosperity to the people, but in other districts, not the case. There is significance and positive effect of election in some estimation, but the result is very fragile to changes in the specifications. The citizens do not choose higher, this is the problem, one of the problems. The citizens do not choose higher quality persons as district head than those appointed in an indirect way through the local parliament. This is the previous model to elect the head of local government. The lack of a growth effect suggests that local governance is not affected by local election in Indonesia. There is research by Sarah Morik and Frederick Solholm in 2014. And how about the next 2024 general election? What the people perspective on that? I mentioned one survey conducted last August for the population is young Indonesian. There are, the findings would be like this. There are 44% 44.4% of young Indonesians who consider public welfare to be a strategic issue in the 2024 election. So public welfare still a big issue, still important issue in the election compared to other issue. And please, next slide. And if we refer to our law, election law, particularly our constitution, and also the law number 7, 2017 on general elections, there is some provisions also in the introduction is mentioned, not specifically, not explicitly the objectives for welfare of the people, but it is implicit that the result of election should achieve the people welfare. Yeah. So this is my concluding remarks, concluding notes. Yeah. Regarding the relations between elections and welfare of the people. First, please, the last slide. First, we should ensure that election run honestly and fairly through the implementation of elections by general election commissions in all levels, and monitor by and enforce of the election law and electoral dispute resolution or electoral justice by Bawaslu, the body who supervise and also enforce the law, the election law. Law enforcers agency like police and also judges and also prosecutors, and also the Constitutional Court for the election contest. Secondly, monitoring and supervision by the people, especially through various non-government institutions, monitors in supervising the election and reporting to Bawaslu, the election supervisory body. The third one, voter education should improve. Voter education to choose the best candidates who has credibility and the ability to create prosperity, not choosing candidates who practice fraud, irregularities such as money politics, etc. The fourth, monitoring and evaluation of the people to executive leaders and people's representatives in the legislative body after they being elected, to ensure that they fulfill their promises during the election campaign and to bring prosperity to the people. And the last one, giving negative consequences, not voting the executive leaders and the people representatives in the legislative body in the following elections if they fail or ignore their own promises during the general elections, because we understand there are many over-promising during the election campaign. So the people should aware of this practice, the over-promising by the candidates during the election process. By that, I conclude my presentation and back to Hani. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay. Big applause for Professor Topo Santoso. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, we will move on to discussion. And we have two participants from Mongolia, Ms. Dula Suren Dasdongdo, and also from Indonesia, Dr. Wilma Silalahi. So each respondent have 7 minutes to respond. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr.
Topo Santos, for your illustrating the important topic. So clear and educate us with your presentation. I would like to point out for some aspects from your essence from your presentation, that is, election is one of the fundamental protection of the democracy. So I have one question from your presentation, the local election part, that the citizens do not choose higher quality persons as direct heads than those appointed in an indirect way through the local parliament. So if you could clarify a little bit just around that part, please. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dulam Suran. Next, from Indonesia, Dr. Wilma Silalahi.
Thank you, Kang Hani, for the opportunity given. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Rahayu, best wishes to all of us. My name is Wilma Silalahi from the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Indonesia. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Of short course, especially to Prof. Topo Santoso for his great presentation. Actually, what Prof. Topo said has been very clear and very helpful in our understanding regarding to implementation of election aimed at the welfare of the Indonesian people by looking at the experience of the Indonesian people in carrying out general election. Speaking related to election aimed at the welfare of the Indonesian people, the holding of general election held by countries that adhere to a democratic system is to select state administrators, including as a process of educating the Republic to realize people sovereignty and ensure power is in the hands of the people. In addition, elections are also a means of changing or transferring power based on election results in according with the principles set out by the Constitution. Through election, the Indonesian people expect the birth of leaders who are able to bring goodness and lead the Indonesian nation to become a developed, prosperous country. Has this been realized with the implementation of election that have been held by the Indonesian people, starting from the legislative election, presidential, and 5 presidential election, including regional head election? Actually, the success of an election is not only the duty and responsibility of the state through the election administrator, but also the responsibility of all elements of the Indonesian nation without exception. If the election is successful, then the positive impact on the level of people welfare can be more guaranteed, because the elected leaders and representatives are expected to side with the community, which is a common goal or desire as a whole, so that in the end of government that gets the trust of the people is realized. Therefore, in the implementation of the election models used in the implementation of the election should be an evaluation of the implementation of the previous election period as the needs and development of the constitutional system. The election is said to run democratically. It's every Indonesian citizen who has the right to vote can channel her choice directly, publicly, freely, confidentially, honestly, and fairly. According to Huntington, election during the transitional period are influenced by the fact that election in the transitional era are first signs of the end of the non-democratic regime, the inauguration of democratic regimes, as well as institutionalization of democracy and rebuilding social cohesion that has been caused by the occurrence attack of war between the various social groups in society. Second, it meant the inauguration of a new government or the inauguration of the democratic regime that replaced the authoritarian government that has fallen. Third, election in the transitional era are a manifestation of the consolidation of the democratic system, the inauguration of the democratic system, which is an attempt to strictly maintain the return of the status quo regime to occupy to the seat of power. Before I end my response, a few questions for Prof. Topo. Has the implementation of election that have been carried out by the Indonesian people, according to Prof. Topo, has credit and honest and fair election implementation to produce election that will prosper the Indonesian people? Is there an evolution of the implementation of the election in the future? And what is the view of Prof is related to holding simultaneous election in 2024, whether it is in accordance with the goals and ideals of the Indonesian nation as mandated by Pancasila and the 1914 Constitution to produce election the prosper the Indonesian people. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Rahayu, I return to Kang Hanif, please.
Yeah, thank you for Ms. Dulam Suran and also Dr. Wilma Silalahi. There is two questions, Rob, from Wilma and from Dulam Suran.
Thank you, Hani. My response go to our friend from Mongolia. Well, I should clarify the system that we use in Indonesia to elect the head of provincial and municipality level, the governor and also the head of municipality. Previous system would be members of local parliament, we call it local parliament. Member of local parliament elect the candidates. The candidates come from several parties who has representative in the parliament, local parliament. So not directly, people of the provinces and of the municipalities choose the governor or the head of municipality. That's the previous system. And the current system would be direct elections by the people, choose the governor, choose the head of municipality, choose the presidential, as well as choose the member of parliament. That is the system. And the system in one side is very democratic because there is a direct elections by the people. But the other effect would be kind of corrupt practices, money, politics spread out in several areas. But we have a system in which election monitoring bodies together with the police and prosecutors will prosecute the offenders of the election offenses. And my response to Wilma, this is also quite important questions. How the implementation of election, if we form from free and fair election perspective, in Indonesia. Well, there are like dynamics of the situations in our history in Indonesia. Like for example, during 1955 elections, of course, even though many scientists say that this very perhaps the most democratic election ever in Indonesia, but also there were some irregularities in that event, but not as many as we have seen in Suharto era, in order new order era, because as I mentioned before, in new Suharto era in 1971 until 1977, we difficult to say that there is there were democratic election during that era, because the system in Suharto is very dominated by power of Suharto and one party during that era. And how about the democratic elections during 1999 until today? Of course, there are several, or perhaps not several, because hundreds of irregularities report to Bawaslu, even thousands, even thousands. When several, and around hundreds of them already prosecuted in the election, in the court, and the offenders punished by the court. But we still see in our election there are corrupt practices, there are violations, but compared to the majority of the elections, I mean, compared to very big voting occasions in Indonesia, there is quite small number, because we have so many votings, TPS itu apa?
Voting booths.
Ya, TPS lah. Jadi voting station, voting station, hundred thousands around Indonesia. So the regularity is quite small number, but we still acknowledge that as a problem in Indonesia. That's to Wilma. Hopefully that the next simultaneous election in 2024 we have better conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your response, Professor Topo Santoso. We have almost 7 minutes. Is that correct? 7 minutes for the last question. So for question and answer, I will invite probably 1 or 2 questions for all of you participants. Our brother from, you can mention your name and also your position in your court, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Izinkan saya menggunakan bahasa Indonesia.
Allow me to use the Indonesian language. We have interpreters working.
Use your communication translator. Oke, silakan Pak. Go ahead.
Izin memperkenalkan diri, nama saya Franco.
My name is Franco Joner from the BPIP or Pancasila Development Body. Allow me to share my questions, 3 questions. The first one, there are issues whereby corruptors can be re-elected in a legislative election. Looking at this issue, if you look at this issue, can you say that this is against democracy or this is against our constitutions or Pancasila or the 5 principles, which is the ideology of our state. So we have voting at the present time. Meanwhile, the values that we have as a state, we have deliberation to reach consensus, which is different from voting. In your opinion, how do you consider voting compared to deliberation to reach consensus? My next question, which is my third question related to my second question. If we have general election normally cost a high expenses. For example, in DKI Jakarta, the region, for example, or the mayor, maybe in Yogyakarta, there are no election, perhaps there. How do you look at this situation? General election may cost a high expense. And how do you see this one? May I know your name once again? My name is Franco. Thank you so much. Mr. Franco.
Question and answer, please. Any question? From Turkey. Okay, go ahead, brother. You can mention your name and your position in
Good
your
afternoon, everyone. I am Orhan. I am from Turkey. Mr. Professor, first of all, thank you for your clear presentation. You mentioned that is there any relation between democracy and welfare? And some authors says yes. For example, Dahl, yes, and the others say no. I wonder that, what's your personal opinion about that? Is there any relation between democracy and welfare? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for very interesting questions. And I will start my answer to my friend from Turkey. I've been there a couple of years ago. Very nice. My personal opinion about the question whether election relate to prosperity or not. My opinion would be yes, there is a relation if certain conditions are fulfilled. Like for example, if the people are clever or smart enough to elect the best candidates during the elections, and the people, the voters, understand the background of the candidates. Yeah, if they don't understand the backgrounds of the candidates, that perhaps money politics will spread. They don't. They just choose anybody in the candidate list. So there's one thing that yeah, there's not guarantee that the leader will fulfill the people people hopes. Yeah, and the other would be. We know in the theory, in the concept, the cyclus of the elections, pre-election, during election, and post-election. The post-election should be the evaluations of the election process itself, and also how the leaders who elected during the elections can fulfill of the promises that he make during the election process. That's the second one. And this, I wonder that people, so that another reason that if all are fulfilled, yeah, and if the election process are free and fair, I hope that there is a positive relation between elections to prosperity of the people. And question from Mas apa tadi? Oh ya, Mas Franco ya, from BPIP ya. This is very important. direct and non-direct election to choose the leader. Well, this is very hot issue in Indonesia during a couple years ago. Some people in the reason of economic, I mean cost and benefit, yeah, we must spend so many billion rupiah to conduct elections, to choose, for example, the governor, the municipality leader, yeah. And as I mentioned before, compared to non-direct election by the member of local parliament, is the result somewhat similar? Yeah, not very different. I mean, the development of the people, of the provinces, of the municipalities, not very different. But I still believe that direct election is better because the people, yeah, can first, yeah, for democratic reasons, for scientific reasons, the people can freely choose who is her leaders in the future. The secondly, the people can monitor what is the promise from the leader, from the candidates, and then evaluate in the next election. I will never choose his or her again if he or she not fulfill his promise. The other related with the corrupt. I mean, in our non-direct election in local parliament, if a candidate, some certain candidate very people, and then he can use the money to bribe, yeah, the members, then the people cannot monitor, cannot prevent that practice. So for several reasons, I still choose the direct election in Indonesia for local leaders, governor, municipality leader. For president and vice president, of course, I think direct election is still better. Thank you, Manny. Oh yeah, you're also mentioned about the candidate who has background as a sentenced person for corruption practice, for corruption, yeah. Well, previous system we prevent the former corruption persons who have convicted in the past to be a candidate. But nowadays the system we modify. That is, if for certain years, and then if there is should be reveal that he or she already convicted in the past. So the information about the background, this background should be revealed to the public. Yeah, that is a system. So even though they can run for the elections, but the people understand that his background is corruption cases. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for Professor Topo Santoso. And I think because time is up, so my conclusion is, you see that everybody agree that free and fair election is become the key to become a welfare state and to become people more prosperous. And of course, with the good court, just like Indonesia Constitutional Court, who has authority as the guardian of the Constitution and the guardian of democracy. So thank you for your attention. Big applause for us. Big applause for Professor Topo. Terima kasih, Pak. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much. Once again, please applause for our moderator and speaker. Thank you so much. Once again to Mr. Hani Adani as our moderator, and of course to our speaker, Professor Topo. Thank you so much. From a very interesting discussion today, and thank you so much discussion and participants as well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this course session 2 has been completed. And before I end this course, I would like to inform you some informations. First, we will have around 45 minutes coffee break at the foyer area. And then the next activity is official opening ceremony by the President of the Republic of Indonesia at 6:15 p.m. in Nusa Dua Hall 5. Please everyone proceed to Nusa Dua Hall 5 before 6:15. Ladies and gentlemen, next for our safety, while waiting for the official opening ceremony, you are not allowed to leave this sterilized hall area. Please, once again, not to leave this sterilized hall area. Please also keep wearing the same attire as it has been sterilized as well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of today's third course, and we believe that today's discussion can give or provide abundant information for the development of the Constitutional Code and then democracy, as well as the rule of law, especially in the Asian region. Lastly, I'm Anaka Gung Yumas. Thank you for your attention and participation, and see you tomorrow. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.